China's economy can't stand still.
New data from China's Ministry of Natural Resources shows that the country's gross ocean product.
China's leadership meets at the largest political event of the year in Beijing today.
In 2021, China, which overtook the European Union economy to become the world's second largest economy after the US, has made great strides in areas such as technology, automotive, renewable energy, and batteries. It has proved its global power by surpassing the US from time to time. One of the most striking examples of this was DeepSeek, the open-source artificial intelligence model announced on January the 27th in 2025. This development led to sharp declines in the shares of US technology giants. In particular, Nvidia's shares fell 17%, the biggest daily drop in its history. Giant companies like Broadcom and Alphabet also suffered serious losses. Today, I will tell you how the Chinese economy has transformed from the factory of the world to the laboratory of the world. Your help motivates me a lot while making these videos. Don't forget to like the video and subscribe to the channel before watching the video. Why is the Chinese economy so strong? In 1958, Mao Zedong's biggest dream was to make China a superpower within a few years, but Mao's wrong policies led to years of famine and millions of deaths in China. What were these wrong policies? First of all, he merged small villages into large agricultural areas, and as a result, people lost their private property. They were forced by force of arms to work on large state-owned farms. The confiscation of produce by the state led to a lack of profit motivation for the people and a decline in production. In addition, steel smelters were set up in many villages to industrialize China. People were forced to stop working in the fields and work in the furnaces. However, due to the poor quality of the steel produced and Mao's wrong agricultural policies, from 1959 to 1961, China experienced the worst famine in its history. As a result, nearly 40 million people died, agriculture collapsed, and the economy went bankrupt. After these events, reforms were introduced under the leadership of Deng Xiaoping and Liu Shaoqi to improve the economy. But Mao, in order to regain his former power, created the Red Guards in 1966, made up of young people, arguing that capitalist ideas were a danger. The Red Guards targeted teachers and intellectuals. Historical monuments and temples were destroyed. Millions of people were tortured, imprisoned, or killed. The result was chaos in China. Later, seeing that this power was out of control, Mao disbanded the Red Guards with an army intervention in 1967 to 1969. After Mao's death, China was in economic stagnation. In 1976, under the leadership of Deng Xiaoping, the Third General Assembly of the 11th Central Committee of the Chinese Communist Party was held. The main purpose of this meeting was to purge China of Mao's economic and political policies, to initiate new economic reforms, and to make China an open economy. Deng Xiaoping stated that the stage of capitalism must be completed before the transition to socialism. Accordingly, market socialism was introduced. You can think of market socialism as partial privatization, meaning that the state did not move completely to the free market, but rather removed controls in some areas while retaining others. This period saw major changes in agriculture, industry, trade, and foreign investment. First, land that had been collectivized under Mao was partially privatized. If people produced more than the quota set by the state, they had the right to sell the surplus on the free market at prices that they set themselves. As a result, agricultural productivity increased, famine ended, and living standards in the countryside rose. The second change was to reduce the weight of the state in the economy over time. It also aimed to reduce military and heavy industry spending and invest more in light industry. With China's transition to the private sector, private businesses were allowed to operate from 1979 onwards, and small and medium-sized enterprises proliferated rapidly. Private workshops and shops began to open in rural areas. This process fostered a spirit of entrepreneurship in China. Perhaps one of the biggest reasons for China's development was the special economic zones established by Deng Xiaoping in 1980. Shenzhen was the first special economic zone established by Deng Xiaoping. Today, Shenzhen is known as the birthplace of technology and automotive giants such as Huavü, BYD, and Tencent. Shenzhen is located in Guangdong province in southern China. Following Shenzhen, cities such as Zhuhai, Shantou, Xiamen, and Hainan have also been declared special economic zones and have played a major role in the development of the Chinese economy. So what makes special economic zones special? For one thing, the cities are close to ports, making it easier to open up to the outside world. Another reason was that they could both ship goods to and receive investment from islands like Hong Kong and Macau. It was also important that the state provided some tax breaks in these cities and did not interfere too much in production. At the same time, significant infrastructure investments were made, and new roads, ports, and airports were built. Electricity, water, and telecommunications infrastructure was developed. Industrial parks and production facilities were established. Logistics networks were created, and customs procedures were accelerated. Over the years, industrial companies and technology companies have come together to create a culture of innovation and technology in these cities. As a result, free economic zones account for 60% of China's foreign trade, 45% of foreign investment, and 22% of annual growth. For example, Shenzhen, a fishing village of only 30,000 inhabitants in 1980, has grown to a population of 17 million and an economic volume of $517 billion. But these reforms have also had side effects. While the coastal regions of the country are getting richer, the inland regions are getting poorer. This is because much of the investment is concentrated in these regions, new jobs are being created, and the population is migrating to these regions, supporting economic growth. Another reason was China's rapprochement with the capitalist world. One of the first steps in this initiative was China's rapprochement with the U.S. in 1972. Before that, there were exports and imports in some parts of China, but not at a significant level. And the main reason for the U.S. rapprochement with China was that it was tired of the Vietnam War and wanted the Soviet Union to engage with neighboring countries and not directly with the U.S. After that, we could see China gradually getting closer to other capitalist countries. It started its first trade forays with countries like Hong Kong, Taiwan, and Japan. This was both because they were geographically close to China and because there were large numbers of ethnic Chinese in these countries. So in the 1980s, not only did investment and trade in China increase, but also companies from the U.S., such as General Motors and Caterpillar, started coming to China. Looking back over these years, we can see that the reforms worked and GDP increased. At the same time, China's Human Development Index has risen, the birth rate has increased, child mortality has decreased, and the welfare of the population has improved. However, this economic development has also had some side effects. These include rising inflation and rising inequality. When we talk about inequality, it is not only people's earnings, but also the differences between cities. As a result, the Tiananmen events erupted in 1989. People gathered in Beijing's Tiananmen Square to protest against government reforms and policies. The state then put an end to these protests with the help of the military. The use of military force led to hundreds, perhaps thousands of deaths and thousands of injuries. After the Tiananmen events, foreign investment declined sharply in 1989 to 1991. The U.S. and other countries imposed an arms embargo on China and suspended some economic relations. Domestic demand fell. China experienced economic stagnation between 1989 and 1991 and calls this period the reorganization process. Afterwards, in order to recover and reorganize the economy, Deng Xiaoping accelerated market reforms with the Southern Tour in 1992 and started a new growth process. When we look at the data, we see that the investments in China increased sharply in the 1990s. This was due to the financial crisis in Asia, China being seen as a safe haven by Asian countries, and the Plaza Agreement of 1985. The appreciation of the Japanese yen, which made investment in Japan more expensive, led investors, even Japanese investors, to invest heavily in China. In the 1990s, China emerged as the world's cheap labor center. Of course, cheap labor is not the only reason for this. Tax breaks, large infrastructure investments, and other incentives offered by the government to foreign investors also played an important role in increasing these investments. This was the period when the well-known Made in China emphasis began. However, the creation of an outward-oriented economy also brought along some controversies. The main issue of these debates raised questions such as how much of the money coming from investors stays in China. After that, a capitalist class was allowed to form in China, and Chinese entrepreneurs started their own enterprises. Since 1994, foreign investors who wanted to enter the Chinese market, especially in the automotive sector, had to invest in China. Companies that wanted to invest in China had to partner with a Chinese businessman. As a result, we see companies like Huawei and BYD were founded in 1996 and Alibaba in 1999. From this, we can see that China is slowly starting to create its own heroes. After 2000, we can see that China has been growing steadily in education and health. However, compared to the previous period, this growth has been at a lower level. The main reasons for this are extensive privatization, deregulation, and increasing inequality. When we look at China's Gini coefficient, we can clearly see this inequality. And we are not just talking about the income gap between individuals, but also inequality between regions. China's inland regions are much poorer than the coastal regions. Although the government has taken serious steps to address this problem since 2000, it's hard to say that the measures taken have been effective enough. Another major issue is environmental problems. Chemical fertilizers, which have long been used in agricultural areas to increase productivity, reduce soil fertility, and pollute riverbeds. In addition, the acceleration of industrialization is increasing air pollution and negatively affecting living standards. Finally, China's massive migration is also a major problem. Massive migration to Beijing, Shenzhen, and other special economic zones is increasing population pressure in these cities. As a result, quality of basic services such as health and education is declining and infrastructure deficiencies are becoming more pronounced. One of the main reasons why China is so powerful today is its policy of copying. Alibaba is the equivalent of Amazon, Baidu is the equivalent of Google, BYD is the equivalent of Tesla, and China has been copying very well for years. Are the Chinese really stealing these ideas, or are they politically treating them as intellectual property? The question is how much R&D investment has gone into coming up with these ideas, and how right it is for China to take them and use them as if nothing happened. So is China doing the same thing? I mean, does it open up its own creation to the world and say, this is the heritage of humanity? Generally, no. There is so much to talk about China, but unfortunately, time is limited. I hope you enjoyed it. Your help motivates me a lot while making these videos. Don't forget to like the video and subscribe to the channel before watching the video. See you.